Hello, and welcome. Today, let's explore together a topic that affects many people more deeply than they might realize. Those moments when we find ourselves caught in patterns of self-criticism or self-hatred. If you've ever found yourself lying awake at night thinking harsh thoughts about yourself, or if you struggle with that inner voice that seems determined to tear you down, this discussion might provide some support. We'll be looking at what current research tells us about why this happens, and more importantly, what scientific evidence suggests we can do about it. The relationship we have with ourselves forms the foundation of our mental well-being, yet many people find themselves trapped in cycles of self-criticism that feel impossible to break. Let's start by understanding what research has discovered about these patterns. Current research suggests that self-hatred isn't actually a character flaw or a sign of weakness, as many people believe. Instead, scientific studies indicate it's often a learned response that develops as a protective mechanism. A comprehensive study published in the 2024 Annual Review of Psychology found that self-criticism often emerges when our brain tries to shield us from potential rejection or failure by beating others to the punch, so to speak. Neuroscientific research has shown us something fascinating about how self-hatred operates in the brain. Studies using brain imaging technology reveal that when we engage in self-critical thoughts, the same neural pathways activate as when we experience physical threat. This research found that the amygdala, our brain's alarm system, becomes highly active during episodes of self-criticism, essentially treating our own thoughts as a source of danger. Recent findings from Taylor and Francis research indicate that self-hatred typically stems from what researchers call shame-based neural pathways. The study explains that individuals experiencing self-hatred often identify themselves completely with their perceived negative traits, creating what the researchers termed self-evaluation of incorrigibility, essentially believing that they are fundamentally flawed in ways that cannot be changed. What's particularly important to understand is that this research suggests self-hatred functions as what scientists call a defense against feeling sadness. When we criticize ourselves harshly, we're often trying to avoid experiencing the deeper pain of disappointment, loss, or unmet needs. While this might seem counterintuitive, the brain sometimes chooses anger toward the self over vulnerability because it feels more controllable. Large-scale studies involving over 3,000 participants have shown that individuals with high levels of self-hatred often experienced critical environments during their formative years. However, the research is clear that these patterns are not permanent. Meta-analyses examining treatment outcomes show remarkable potential for change when appropriate interventions are applied consistently over time. Now let's explore what current research suggests can help break these patterns. The good news is that multiple studies have identified effective, evidence-based approaches that many people can practice safely. The first method is what researchers call the self-compassion break technique. Dr. Kristen Neff's research has shown that structured self-compassion practices can reduce self-hatred symptoms by an average of 43% within 8 weeks. The technique involves 3 specific steps that work by activating the brain's caregiving system rather than its threat detection system. Here's how the self-compassion break works. When you notice self-critical thoughts arising, place both hands gently on your heart. This physical gesture activates the vagus nerve, which research shows helps regulate our nervous system. Take 3 slow, deep breaths, then say to yourself, "This is a moment of suffering." This acknowledgement helps the brain recognize what's happening without adding additional judgment. Next, remind yourself that suffering is part of the human experience. This statement is crucial because it activates what researchers call our common humanity, the recognition that struggle is universal rather than a sign of personal failure. Finally, offer yourself kindness by saying, "May I be kind to myself in this moment." Studies using brain imaging show that this practice, when done consistently, actually rewires neural pathways over time. The second evidence-based method focuses on cognitive reframing, but with a specific approach that research has shown to be particularly effective. Instead of trying to argue with self-critical thoughts, which often backfires, the technique involves what scientists call metacognitive awareness, essentially stepping back and observing the thoughts rather than believing them automatically. When self-critical thoughts arise, research suggests saying to yourself, "I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I hate myself," rather than simply, "I hate myself." This subtle shift activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for perspective taking and emotional regulation. Studies show this technique helps create psychological distance from harmful thoughts, making them less powerful over time. The third method involves what researchers call self-compassionate letter writing. Studies have found that writing letters to yourself from the perspective of a compassionate friend can significantly reduce self-criticism levels. The process works by activating neural networks associated with social support and care, even when that support is coming from yourself. To practice this method, set aside 15 minutes to write a letter addressing your perceived flaws or mistakes, but from the perspective of someone who cares about you deeply. Research shows that this practice helps people access their own capacity for kindness while also developing what scientists call self-soothing skills that can be used during difficult moments. The fourth approach is grounded in mindfulness research. Studies have shown that many people who struggle with self-hatred also experience what researchers call experiential avoidance, a tendency to push away difficult emotions, which often intensifies them. Mindfulness-based interventions teach a different approach, noticing self-critical thoughts and feelings without immediately trying to change or fix them. Research indicates that this approach works because it gradually reduces the brain's reactivity to self-critical thoughts. When we can observe these thoughts with curiosity rather than immediately believing or fighting them, studies show that their emotional impact tends to diminish over time. The key is developing what researchers call psychological flexibility, the ability to experience difficult internal states without being overwhelmed by them. Finally, research has identified something called values-based action as particularly helpful for people struggling with self-hatred. Studies show that when people can identify what truly matters to them and take small steps aligned with those values, regardless of their internal state, it helps build what researchers call psychological resilience. This doesn't mean ignoring self-critical thoughts, but rather learning to act on what's important to you even when those thoughts are present. Research suggests this approach helps people develop a sense of meaning and purpose that becomes stronger than their self-critical patterns over time. It's important to understand why these methods are thought to be effective. Neuroscientific research shows that self-compassion practices activate the brain's caregiving system, which releases oxytocin and reduces cortisol levels. This biological shift helps regulate the nervous system and promotes feelings of safety and connection, even with ourselves. To summarize what we've discussed today, first, research suggests that self-hatred is often a learned protective mechanism, not a permanent aspect of who you are. Second, scientific studies show that self-compassion practices can create measurable changes in brain structure and function within weeks of consistent practice. Third, the hands-on heart technique provides a simple, immediate way to activate your nervous system's calming response during difficult moments. Fourth, reframing self-critical thoughts as observations rather than facts helps create psychological distance from harmful thinking patterns. Fifth, letter writing from a compassionate perspective helps develop self-soothing skills that research shows can be accessed during challenging times. Sixth, values-based action helps build resilience and meaning that can withstand self-critical episodes. If you're struggling with self-hatred, please remember that current research provides hope for change. These patterns developed over time, and with patience and consistent practice, they can be transformed. Many people who once felt trapped in cycles of self-criticism have found genuine relief through evidence-based approaches like these. The journey towards self-acceptance isn't always linear, and it's okay if progress feels slow some days. What matters is taking small, consistent steps toward treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a good friend. Research shows that change is possible, and you deserve that possibility too. If today's discussion provided any support, please hit the like button to help this content reach others who might benefit. If you'd like to continue learning about mental health together, please subscribe for more evidence-based discussions. May your hearts feel a little lighter, and thank you for listening until the end today.